And anything you want, like we can edit, everything
Okay.
should be fine.
Could you blur out my face? And
We'll do a beauty filter.
okay. Yeah, it better be a big filter.
Well, thank you so much for having us on, or coming on to the
Thanks for having me.
podcast. Yeah. So why don't we start? Tell us who you are and what do you do?
Okay. My name is Rick Schoeberlein. I'm a retired law enforcement investigator locally here. Spent 25 plus years in counting, working in one capacity or another as a police officer and then investigator. I currently am working a bunch of different part-time jobs, all some semi-related to the law enforcement field. Was certified a polygraph examiner in 2012, and initially was criminal-specific type, like did you shoot that guy or did you steal that car type stuff. And it's evolved over the years. I retired, and my partner and I started a business, which we actually were under the umbrella of a private investigation firm called Seeger Services, and they sort of administer the admin side of things.
Okay.
But we've branched out to do now we do criminal-specific tests for defense attorneys and things like that, as well as post-convicted sex offender testing to make sure that they're complying with their conditions of their probation.
Okay.
And then we also do pre-employment polygraphs for different law enforcement agencies for new hires to make sure that they're telling the truth in their background, et cetera.
Right. So, and you, so do you solely just do the polygraph exams, you yourself?
Myself and my partner both.
Okay, both do that.
We invested in an instrument because they're rather expensive. We
Yeah.
invested in an instrument together, so we sort of share the instrument, and we share the clients as they come up. It's my turn, is it your turn, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. Also, I should probably introduce Sam. Sam is a part of King Law, and this is her first time on the podcast, so welcome.
Happy to be here.
Yes. All right. So, I mean, polygraph exams, I feel like, are so interesting to people because, I mean, it's a way to test whether you're lying or telling the truth.
People want to know.
Yeah.
I will correct you. It's not a lie detector.
Oh,
it's a deception of detection technique.
Oh, okay. What
So
is that? What does that mean?
It doesn't necessarily say that, hey, you're lying and a big light goes off, but you're not telling the whole truth about whatever's being asked.
Okay.
So there's bold, outright lies. The lights are off in this room is a bold, outright lie.
Right.
I stole the Hope Diamond. That's an outright lie. Now this is not true, so I don't want. This is one of the examples I use during it to explain this to examinees. This is not true. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that.
Not
but
true.
For a lot of people, that are examinees that are being tested, they understand this. Like, so if somebody asks me, "Have you ever tried marijuana?" Yes. But in reality, if I had smoked marijuana 5 times a day, every day for 10 years, in both cases, I did try marijuana, but I'm withholding the amount in the second scenario.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
And can this
And again,
test,
that's not true.
Can this test pick up on that?
Yes.
Okay.
The instrument will read that as being a lie if you're withholding something.
Okay.
So-
All right, so maybe we should get into like what. Like, all right, what do I want to ask first? There's so many questions I'm like excited about. I'm so excited about this one. So, all right, so what these tests can be used for what? Like, who's hiring you and what are these tests used for?
Okay, well, let's take them one at a time. So
Okay.
typically if we're hired by a law enforcement agency, it's for one of two reasons. Primarily, it's because they want to test a potential hire to make sure that they haven't committed serious crimes against people, serious property crimes, they've been truthful with their drug use, and that they have not had any significant employment issues. Those are the, I guess, boilerplate questions.
Okay.
Obviously, depending on what the background investigator finds and what they want to, if there's anything specific, we could also generate a question that specifically addresses whatever issue they think they may have found.
Okay.
Additionally, so those are pre-employment tests. Those are usually for law enforcement agencies. We can also, and it's rare, but occasionally a law enforcement agency will engage our services to do a criminal specific exam, like I already mentioned. Did you shoot that guy? Did you steal that car? Those kind of things. That's one client, I would say. I already mentioned post-convicted sex offender testing, and so that's probation and parole. You could use, it doesn't have to be sex offenders, it could be anybody on probation or parole, and they have certain conditions, as we all know. And those kind of tests are called multi-issue tests, and they're, did you follow these conditions? Did you violate this condition? And it's a multi-issue test.
Okay.
Whereas the criminal specific is just one issue, which is, those are more accurate overall because you're only addressing one issue.
Right. And obviously, like, criminal defense attorneys use them. And it's funny that there are so many agencies that use these tests, even though they're not admissible in court. It's kind of interesting, don't you think?
I'm not going to argue the legalities of admissible and not admissible. My understanding is, and this is going way back more than 10 years ago, is that they're admissible if both sides agree, but I can't imagine a scenario where both sides, the prosecution and the defense, would agree, because it's going to be negative for somebody.
It really helps establish credibility, too, in some capacity.
Yes.
Yeah.
So deeper on a more political level, if a jury of your peers is sitting there judging you, evaluating the facts of the case, and they hear that the defendant failed a polygraph, that could influence the results of the case.
Right.
And people don't even really know what a polygraph's all about.
Right. Guilty. Just kidding.
But also, in its early stages, the polygraph had a very bad reputation because there was no standardization, there was no training, or minimal training, and it was just like one examiner was doing it one way, one examiner was doing it another way, and they all said my way is the best.
Okay.
And now there's the American Association of Police Polygraphists. There's the American Polygraph Association. If you're a member, you have to maintain their standards and ethics and continuing education and so forth, and use the standardized procedures that have been scientifically based and researched, et cetera.
All right.
It's probably more than you wanted to know.
No. Like I said, this fascinates me. So let's talk about the science behind it. Like, how do you establish who's telling the truth, or who is, how do you establish the results?
So everybody's inherently afraid of getting caught in a lie, right? So nobody's going to tell a lie that they know they're going to get caught telling.
Okay.
Unless it's like a joke or being facetious or something. So can you describe for me how it felt like the first time you ever got pulled over by the police?
Yeah, like I was having a heart attack. Like I felt guilty.
Not fun.
Even if I didn't do anything wrong,
Well, you both just admitted that you've been pulled over by the police.
Won't say that I haven't.
Whoops.
So sorry, Mom.
Nothing bad.
But that feeling that you feel is your sympathetic nervous system kicking in to protect you from a perceived danger. Okay? So boiling it down to make it really simple, what it's doing is conserving energy for you to do one of two things: fight or flight, right?
Okay.
So
actually just learned about this,
just think about a deer in the headlights. Sometimes they freeze and sometimes they run. That's their sympathetic nervous system addressing a perceived danger, doesn't have to be a real danger, a perceived danger, and taking some kind of action as a result. When you're asked a question that you're going to lie to, your body reacts the same way. It's more subtle, hence we need the instrument to measure it all.
Okay.
So the things that we measure during a polygraph are your breathing, your heart rate, blood pressure, your blood pressure changes, your pulse, all that stuff will change as a result of being presented with a danger, as well as the electrodermal skin conductivity, which is, your sweaty palms.
Yeah.
So those things taken as a whole, we don't ever base it on just one category.
Okay.
It's always a collective global assessment of the reactivity during a test.
Okay.
And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, so when you first sit down, and obviously most people are nervous when they're about to take a test like this, do you measure like a resting heart rate even though it's elevated because they're nervous?
So, tell a little story. So a relative a few years ago was in the process to be hired by an agency. And it had some time went by. It's not somebody that I see frequently. And I was going through the process, and I failed the polygraph. I'm like, well, what'd you lie about? Well, I didn't lie. I was nervous. So I sat down with him and I explained to him nervousness in and of itself will not cause you to fail the test.
Okay.
Because your nervousness is consistent throughout the test.
Yeah.
It's not more or less nervous on any particular question unless you're lying to it.
Okay. So, and with the other things that you're looking for, it also will show that you're not telling the truth or that something's not truthful. Like based on, so it's not just your heart rate. Because you have the other factors in there, you can also tell that.
Correct. And I guess maybe I'm being a little bit vague. So during the test, there's three overall generally accepted types of questions that are asked in a polygraph. There's known truth questions. Questions that we both know, the examiner and the examinee both know that you're telling the truth to. Mm-hmm. There's questions, investigatory questions, whoever's case it is or agency that wants to hire you, what they're trying to find out. Did you kill that guy? Did you violate this condition of your probation?
Yeah.
And then the third question is known lie questions that we both know that you're lying to.
Okay.
Like one of the questions is, have you ever committed a minor traffic law violation, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And something everybody's done. So it's not like there's no stigma attached to
Right.
it. Everybody's, ran across the yellow line or something. Everybody's whether or not they got caught or not is irrelevant. Mm-hmm. But so we have questions that we know the truth to, that we know that they're lying to.
Yeah.
And then we have questions that we want to know the answers to. And they're all equally as important. They're all taken together and compared, and then an opinion is rendered of the overall reactivity.
When you're asking these questions, do you have to stick to yes or no answers, or how does that work?
Absolutely, because any question you ask that's beyond yes or no, you might wander off. It's yes or no because the more they're answering, the more they're thinking, the more it could corrupt the data, the physiological data that we're collecting.
Okay.
But yes, they're always yes or no questions. Or no. And there's even cases where you can do a silent answer test where you ask a question and they just think of the answer and they don't actually reply.
Oh, and that works?
It's the question that's the stimulus. It's not the answer.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That's interesting.
That is. You don't even have to say anything and you already know the answer.
So what can affect a result of a test? If you, let's say, can caffeine or substances of any sort, can those affect results?
Caffeine, no, unless it's like such an excessive amount. Any medications, prescription, over the counter, caffeine, taken in
10
normal
shots of espresso, is that overkill?
Maybe, depends on, but whatever's normal for you though. If you always take 10 shots of espresso every day, your body's used to that. It's not going to change anything.
Mm-hmm. I don't.
But if you
heart could not handle that. But
if you don't drink coffee and you drink 10 cups of coffee, that's not normal.
Right.
Most of the time, what affects tests is people either purposely or unintentionally trying to manipulate the test. Whether it's moving around a lot because you have to sit still. Mm-hmm. Accentuating your breathing when it's one of the directions during before the pre-test phase is sit still, breathe normal. If you can't follow directions, the two reasons the two things you need to do, first of all, to pass a test, tell the truth and follow directions. The three reasons why somebody might not react favorably on a particular question is they're lying, they forgot to talk about something ahead of time, or they are too ashamed or too embarrassed.
Right, to answer. Mm-mm. So is that so substances like caffeine, they don't necessarily affect it, but what about, we talked about anxiety, but what about, blood pressure, having high blood pressure or any illnesses and diseases, can those impact?
No, because they maintain consistency throughout the test. So, yes, somebody might have high blood pressure, but it's not going to be high at the beginning and low at the end, or vice versa. Okay. It's going to be consistent. Right. So, and as far as over-the-counter drugs and prescription drugs, Yeah, some have a slight effect, but very rarely is any particular drug going to have an effect where it would, it would take away the possibility of doing an accurate test.
Okay. So the lesson here is be consistent.
Well, when I make an appointment for somebody to come in to take a polygraph exam, if you take prescription medication, take them as normal. No drugs or alcohol 24 hours before the hand.
Like you don't want someone going through the withdrawal and then taking this test.
Right, and we don't. So the best way to prepare for the test is just to get a good night's sleep.
Okay.
And it's the age of the internet, obviously. So more often than not, they've done research on their own. And let's take it from like if you're diagnosed with whatever, say it's a minor medical condition. If you start digging into the web, you're going to find worst case scenarios all over the place for even probably a hangnail or something.
Right.
So a lot of people do themselves a disservice by doing a lot of research ahead of time, because now they've gotten all these opinions on the internet that may or may not, sorry to burst your bubble, but everything on the internet is not true.
What?
Bummer. Wow.
Sam, did you know this?
I was unaware. This is news to me.
Yes. Well, and it probably makes you a little bit more nervous because now you're like, okay, I have to remember to do these 4 things in order to pass this test, and then you're
it should be easy to
not
tell the
thinking
truth.
about what's in front of you.
Right? The truth you don't have to think about.
Yeah.
If you're going to make up a lie, you have to think about that. There's creativity there. And so there's more pressure. It's more likely that you're going to get found out when you're not telling the truth.
Yeah.
So that it heightens your anxiety level.
So walk me through what a test is like. And so we talked about being prepared. So basically you get a good night rest, you do what you normally do, and you come in, and then what?
So obviously introduce myself.
Yeah.
But the first portion of the test is simply sitting across the table from the examinee and just talking to them, making sure they're physically and mentally capable of taking the test, which 99.9% of all people are. That's one of the things I use in my test. It's like a standard. So you ask a simple medical questions: diabetes, ulcer, heart condition, so forth and so on. Do you take any medication? Did you take it today as you're supposed to take it? And it's a medical checklist and psychological checklist. Do you see a psychiatrist? Are you diagnosed with anything? Which doesn't eliminate them from being able to take the test. I've done well over 500 tests. I've been doing tests for 10 plus years, and I've only ever told one person, we're not going to test you today, and they showed up to the exam intoxicated. So
I was gonna say, what if you came in drunk? That's not a good plan.
We don't do the test, and it's not a plan that's going to get you through the test.
I do have a question. So, like, let's say you ask someone, "Did you take your regular medications today?" They say no. What do you do?
Well,
same thing. You just be like, "Well, you can't take the test," or does it like?
No, it depends on what the medication is,
Gotcha,
and even if it even has any impact on the test.
Okay.
So
it's just a formality thing.
We have access to a drug reference that if whatever the drug may be, we plug it into the reference, and because nobody knows there's new drugs coming out every day,
Absolutely.
so there's no way you could memorize them all. But I'm trying to think of something, Flonase, I don't know, just the first thing that popped in.
Yeah.
It has no effect on a test.
Yeah.
And so it will actually break it down where I already talked about the 3 different things that we measure: breathing, heart rate, and electrodermal activity, right?
Yes.
It breaks it down so a drug may affect one and not all 3. And it tells you, it even tells you how much it affects: slight increase, significant, or none. I mean,
That's really cool.
So it knows more than I'll ever know. But if it's something significant, then maybe we put off the test and say, hey, next time, make sure you take your medication as you normally do. But I haven't had it. Like I said, 500 plus tests. I've never had that happen.
Yeah. So, all right. So we come in, you do the pre-evaluation, and then, like, what is the machine? Does it get strapped to your body? Like,
Okay.
what does it look like?
I have seen this part on like TV and stuff.
So it's the instrument, the polygraph instrument, whatever company makes it. There's 4 or 5 different kinds out there. They all generally do the same things. They have attached to your person would be 2 pneumograph tubes that are just like big rubber bands that go around your chest, and they monitor the involuntary movements associated with breathing. Then you have just like you see in the doctor's office, a blood pressure cuff on your arm. It's sustained pressure, not like the doctor just does it for 30, 40 seconds and then tells you what your blood pressure is. This is continuously under pressure for the entire time. It's just monitoring the relative changes in your blood pressure.
Okay.
Like I can't tell somebody that you're 120/80.
Right.
Like
Because it's not grabbing it
Right.
that hard the whole time. Yeah.
And it's literally just monitoring the changes in your blood pressure, which is going to change if you're presented with a danger, which is lying to a question. And then the third thing is the electrodermal skin activity. So it's everything, not everything, but I guess the synapses, neurons, nerves all work with electricity.
Okay.
Right? Electric.
Yeah.
Current. And so it doesn't introduce any electricity, it just monitors what's already present. And those things change as all as all the physiological reactions change when you're presented with that perceived danger.
Okay.
And then there's also it's not helpful in detecting deception unless somebody's purposely trying to defeat the test. But everybody sits on a movement sensor that's very sensitive. If you're wiggling your toes in your shoes, it'll pick that up.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you're very emphatic when you say yes or no, it'll pick up you shaking. I mean, it's very sensitive.
Yeah.
So, and what that's for is if two reasons. One, people have a tough time sitting still. And even when they're telling the truth, they may accentuate their answer by nodding their head, or somebody's purposely trying to defeat the test. They may clench their muscles when they're lying to, did you shoot that guy? No, it's very, very exaggerated, but so the movement sensor lets us know if they're doing that either unintentionally or intentionally.
Okay.
And then if they're doing it unintentionally, well, hey, listen, this is what's going on. Let's just try to get through this.
Yeah.
Try to avoid that. And if they're doing it intentionally, then we'll try to ask them, what's going on? Why are you doing this? Is there something you need to tell me? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Yeah. How long does a test typically last?
I've had I've had them last up to 5.5 hours.
Wow.
When somebody's very talkative and has a lot to reveal. And I've had them take as quickly as an hour and a half.
So can someone explain themselves for the yes or no answer after the fact?
I guess I glossed over that part. So when somebody comes in, the first thing we do is we sit down and we have a chat. They tell me their name, date of birth. We do some administrative stuff, a waiver, giving, it has to be voluntary. We're not going to force anybody to take it, because that raises all the anxiety when you're forcing somebody to do something. And then we talk for a while about all the medical stuff, and then why are we here? We don't just sit and start taking the test. What are we doing here? Are we doing a post-release conditions test? Are we doing a pre-employment? If we're doing a pre-employment, we might talk about, okay, in your entire life, have you ever stolen something greater than $25? Or have you ever been reprimanded at work? Or there's a whole host of questions. But you talk about it, and you give them the opportunity to say, yes, I did that. Yes, well, what kind of drugs have you tried? Well, I've tried, 3 or 4 times. I tried marijuana, but I've never done anything else.
Okay.
And then we question them on that,
right.
And if they're telling the truth, based on the instrument,
that makes sense. Yes.
So that's the part I probably glossed over earlier, and I apologize for that.
No,
So you don't. If it's a criminal specific exam, did you shoot that guy? You talk about the case, obviously.
Right.
But just like anything else, if you're talking and they're not talking, they're not going to reveal anything.
Okay.
So it's sort of a open-ended. Okay, so why are we here today? And then they let them go.
Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
Qualifying questions or clarifying questions are fine, but don't do what I'm doing now and talk too much.
Yeah. Yep.
So the results of the test, like if you see them on TV, like I don't know if you saw the Kardashians through Vogue did a lie detector test, and they asked each other questions. Did you see that?
Recently?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not.
So, and the examiner was there, and they said yes or no that was true in the moment. That doesn't happen, right?
I think that's a Hollywood. I was watching a TV show not too long ago where it's a police show. Go figure. But they're bringing the police officers in to try to find out who stole the money from the crime scene. And it's like there's the examiner sitting at one end and the police officer under investigation, and then like his command staff. Like it's one-on-one. There's no
Okay.
like group interview
Yes.
when you do a polygraph.
And like, so the answers, the results, do you share that with the individual in the moment, or sometimes you probably can't? Like, how does that work?
Immediately following the test, you may have a preliminary idea of how they're going to do, but I don't ever give anybody the final results of the test there, because I want to take to go over it. I want to take the time and look at it like with a fine-tooth comb and make sure I'm not missing something.
Right. Or each question, you're not like, you failed, or like, yes, that's true.
Well, we should have a buzzer.
Yeah.
What would you be missing after you review it? Like just different things in.
Well, so we talked about the different. They're called channels. The breathing, the heart rate, the electrodermal activity, and the seat sensor.
Just making sure you read all those, double check them and stuff.
Have you ever seen like a medical show where the EKGs bouncing
Yes.
across? That's exactly what a polygraph is.
Okay.
It's all these little lines bouncing across the screen, and the screen scrolls.
Yeah.
So
So you can't see every line as it's
So you
going.
got to go back. I see.
you're concentrating on A, them, and B, the instrument to make sure, because things change. They go up and down, and they may leave the screen. You have to calibrate the instrument to be able to keep it
Right.
recording what you're trying to collect. So there's a lot to do all at once. So to try to interpret the data is pretty hard.
Yeah.
But you generally know, because but I hesitate to say what it is because I want to look at it without the pressure of being in the room.
Right.
And
You want to do your job.
there's
check everything.
possibility that you missed a movement on a question that may have affected the question.
Right. Well, that kind of brings me to my next question is, are there any tells that you've come across in your experience that have nothing to do with the test? That you're like, oh, that person's lying, or oh, they are telling the truth?
Well, I don't want to get too specific here
Okay.
because you give away all my secrets.
Give me some.
So, and you can see it. I mean, poker players, poker tells. You know, somebody always, they have a good hand, they scratch their head, or they bounce their knee, or whatever. And those are the neuro-linguistic programming that you don't you consciously don't know you're doing.
Yeah.
And there's millions of them, and that in and of itself is not like, oh, they're lying because they're bouncing their knee.
Right.
That in conjunction with other things like verb tense and minimizing and deflecting, those all go hand in hand to collectively say, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the instrument may or may not verify that. Verb tenses is a big thing. It's like they're talking about my loved one that's missing. If they use the past tense, tell them I loved them, then they're sort of indicating that they're no longer with us.
Right.
There's other ones too. There's statement analysis is very interesting. I'm not very, I'm not up to speed on it, but the way people say something tells a lot about whether it's true or not. When somebody tells a story about a particular event, it should be even. What they talk about at the beginning, what they talk about the event, and what they talk about after the event should all pretty much be about the same amount of time.
Yes.
If somebody spends 80% of their time talking about before the event, glosses over the event and then talks, a little bit about the after event, why is that? Why they're afraid to talk about the actual event or not?
Okay.
That's just
and
none of it's the end all and be all. It's just indicators.
Just interesting. What do they say? Like if people are talking to you and then they look to the left, that it's an indication of that they're not telling the truth. Like,
Something
do you
like
ever
that.
see any truth to those? In your opinion, I mean, obviously it has nothing to do with the test, but just in your own general
Yeah, the answer is
observation.
yes, sometimes, but rare. So the theory behind that, if I'm remembering my interview and interrogation schools correctly, is, and I don't know which way is which because but if you look one direction, you're recalling a memory. If you look the other direction, you're creating a memory.
Okay.
Because left brain, right brain,
Okay.
and that's the extent of my medical training.
Cool.
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you enjoy what you do?
So when I first got promoted to investigator, I started working with a gentleman that was already established investigator and a polygraph examiner, and I found it interesting. We talked about it over coffee here and there. I knew he was eligible to retire. The other examiner in the office was eligible to retire. At the time, I had a long time left to go on the job. And I just found it really interesting that all the stuff that we've already talked about, it's like, it works. And people that don't understand how it works, like, I'll give you a little story real quick.
Yeah.
When I first came back from polygraph school, I had a coworker ask me if I could do a polygraph on one of his suspects. And he says, "Yeah, do you mind help me out? Can you throw your chicken bones and see if you can tell this guy's lying?" And I did the test. The guy failed the test, and the guy confessed to a pretty heinous crime. And I was new. I was all excited. It worked, And but I also changed his view on polygraph. Like,
Right.
I explained this test. I sat down with him and I showed him the test and how it works. And from that point on, it's been one of his best friends. But I find it interesting because my partner and I have, over the years, have coworkers and friends. We've given them a deck of cards, pick a card, and then we've tested them. And every single time we've been able to tell them which card they picked.
Truth. Oh, that's cool.
so cool.
That's really cool.
That's sort of like
like that.
Party tricks.
parlor games, but
Yeah.
it does
Can I
work.
have a booth at the psychic fair? Yeah. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Well, I find this fascinating. I enjoy the science behind it. Yeah, I mean, do you have any other questions about it? I wish we could do it on each other. That would be hilarious.
That would be so fun.
There's maybe some things that you don't want to know.
Yeah,
It would
that's
be a little
true.
stressful.
Never ask a question you don't want the answer to.
That's correct.
Well, yeah, I think that answered everything for me.
Well,
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Can I plug the
Yes,
Seeger
please
Services?
tell me where we can find you.
SeegerServices.com is the website, and the email is seeger@seegerservices.com. And the company itself does all sorts of different private investigation functions, and Polygraph is one of them. And
Sweet.
that's where we can be found.
Awesome.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks for
Thank
having me
you.
on.
Bye.